Lois, thanks so much. Yeah, we're trying to follow up because the question is Patrick Brown, who was on our network earlier, and I spoke to him both on radio and on television, and he made the allegation that the party has not provided him any details as to why he was just disqualified from the race. He's called it politically corrupt process. He has made allegations that it's anti-democratic, and it's all that Pierre Poilievre, as you just saw, was behind it all and has put his thumb on the scale. Joining me now is the president of the Conservative Party of Canada, Rob Batherson, to give us some insight on the other side. First of all, Rob, good to have you back on the program. So the Leadership Election Organizing Committee has disqualified Brown, saying the party became aware of serious allegations of wrongdoing by Pat Brown that appear to violate financial provisions of Elections Canada. Patrick Brown told me twice today that these are anonymous allegations. He called them phantom allegations from someone. He said the party has never given any details about the person or the company. Is that true? What details did the Brown and the Brown campaign have?
Well, Evan, thanks first off for the opportunity to come on air. It's a sad day. Nobody wants to be in a situation, and no member of the Leadership Election Organizing Committee wants to be in a situation where they have to disqualify a candidate. And last week, after several weeks of review and due diligence by a very small group at Conservative headquarters, written both verbally and in writing information, and a request for information was shared with the Patrick Brown campaign at the most senior level. And we worked very hard to afford Mr. Brown and his campaign all the due process in the hopes that the Patrick Brown campaign would come into compliance not only with our rules, but to ensure that they weren't violating the Canada Elections Act. And we have a double responsibility. We have to make sure that our rules are enforced, but we also ask our candidates, and we put that into the rules, that they have an obligation to follow the provisions of the Canada Elections Act. And unfortunately, the response from the Patrick Brown campaign was wanting. There were follow-up discussions between the chair of the Leadership Election Organizing Committee and, I understand, the chair of Mr. Brown's leadership campaign. And at the end of the day, we had to come to a decision whether to keep Mr. Brown under a serious cloud of wrongdoing, both in terms of the party rules, the Canada Elections Act, or disqualify him. Plus, we needed to make sure that as a party, we did the right thing and the responsible thing when it came to allegations of violating federal law, and that was to refer all the information to the appropriate authorities at Elections Canada. Right. And my understanding is we're in the process of transferring those files over, hopefully, if not today, then by tomorrow.
So here's what Patrick Brown, Mr. Batherson, president of the Conservative Party, I'm quoting Mr. Brown to me today. The party wouldn't provide any details. It is impossible to respond to a phantom allegation. He repeatedly said he didn't do anything wrong. They weren't given any details. Is Mr. Brown telling the truth when he says the party would not provide any details? It's impossible to respond to a phantom allegation.
Mr. Brown and Mr. Brown's campaign was provided a significant amount of questions and information. Mr. Brown and his campaign provided a response that was wanting, and Mr. Brown and his campaign provided additional time to provide information so that LEOC did not have to come to this position of having to disqualify him. Keeping in mind, though, that as a party...
Well, how long did this go on for? Because apparently they've told me, Mr. Batherson, they were caught off guard, they didn't have any details, they weren't told anything, and I want you to respond to the other allegations, but you're saying when did the first details of the allegation that LEOC was aware of, the Leadership Election Organizing Committee and the party, when were the first allegations made? Were the names of the people? I understand it was an allegation, and this is the allegation that Pat Brown told me, was that there was a payment of campaign costs and expenses directly by businesses supporting the Brown campaign. He says he doesn't know who made the allegation. He says he doesn't know what businesses they are, and he doesn't know who allegedly in the party, in his campaign, was part of it. Did the party tell Mr. Brown's campaign who made the complaint, what the name of the company was, so he could investigate? Was all that information delivered to the Brown campaign? He says it was not.
So, Evan, I have to be careful here because we're now looking at allegations and materials that are going to be handed to a federal investigative body. So I have to respect the process that they're required to follow by law. What I can say is there were multiple discussions between the chair of the Leadership Election Organizing Committee, right, the party's legal counsel, Mr. Brown's campaign chair, Mr. Brown's legal counsel, a written submission and a detailed written submission and request for information provided to Mr. Brown's campaign on June 30th, and a response that came forward on July 1st found wanting and was communicated to Mr. Brown's campaign as being wanting in terms of addressing these allegations of not following the party rules and not following the Canada Elections Act. And we have to take situations of potential law breaking seriously.
Okay, but so you're now saying Mr. Brown, when he tells me he never got any of those details, you're saying that's not true. He's not telling you the truth. Mr. Brown said this to me. I'm going to quote him. "We know where this is coming from. It was Pierre Poilievre's supporters on the Leadership Election Organizing Committee that were pushing this. Clearly, his campaign wanted me out of the race. He believes this has tainted the process, and he's called it politically corrupt." Was it the Poilievre camp and his supporters on Leac? Can you respond to that? And what's your response to the allegations that this is now politically corrupt?
So first off, I've known Patrick Brown for over 20 years. I'd have a beer with him. He'd have a coffee. He's not a drinker. And so what we have to do is set aside personal relationships as members of the Leadership Election Organizing Committee who are charged and required under Article 6.2 of our party's constitution to be neutral and to do the right thing. And if we could have avoided, as Leac, a situation where we had to disqualify Patrick Brown, we obviously would have chosen that route. Right. And so we are trying to do the right thing. We are trying to make sure that our rules are followed and that the candidates, all 6 candidates, follow the rules, and that federal law is followed. And I would point out that last month, when the then national campaign co-chair of Patrick Brown's campaign, Michelle Rempel-Garner, MP, good conservative, they flagged an issue regarding a party member allegedly communicating racist conduct and declaring himself a supporter of Pierre Poilievre. This party acted immediately. So we deal with allegations.
Okay, but so I just have 2 minutes.
No, let me finish. So, regardless of the source and regardless of the target, we act on those allegations the same way and treat them to the best of our ability.
When will people
and
see?
Give candidates.
Okay, so but in the spirit of transparency. But Mr. Batherson, in the spirit of transparency, Mr. Brown is coming on saying, I don't know any of this evidence. No one's seen it. It was done late at night. Shouldn't the party and the Leac, will they reveal more details of these allegations? Show the evidence why this reached the threshold to boot a leading candidate out. It's a pretty tough threshold. When will the evidence be made public?
Well, we have to share that evidence, Evan, with the investigative body to determine whether there are grounds to file charges or take action on the Canada Elections Act. So when you deal with whether it's an ongoing police investigation or you deal with an investigation that is likely to occur from a federal body, that's the process that we have to respect now.
Last question before I let you go. Can you just give us some details, Mr. Batherson? Have ballots with Mr. Brown's name not only been printed but mailed out? And if so, is there any effort or any, have you ruled out printing new ballots and resending them out without Brown's name?
Well, Evan, as you know, and as everybody knows, it's our third leadership race in 5 years. We ran into a situation as a party in 2017 when Kevin O'Leary withdrew from the leadership race after the ballots were printed. And we simply don't have the time to do a reprint of 675,000 ballots and meet the deadline of announcing a new leader by September 10th. So the ballots will go out as they did with Kevin O'Leary's name on it in 2017. And with a preferential ballot, there will be second and third choices that will be applied once a candidate drops off the ballot.
Okay, so Brown's name's on it, and you're not delaying the process in any way. Timelines all stay.
Correct.
Robert Batherson, President of the Conservative Party of Canada. Pretty remarkable day. I know Patrick Brown says he's looking at his legal options. This story may not be over, but I really appreciate you giving us your perspective on this. Thank you, sir.